Before tonight's horrors unfold, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Your support keeps the horrors alive. Let's begin. Zuman stood there frozen in shock. Piles of books lay scattered around the cottage, and the once neatly cleaned sofa was now marred with strange black stains. A stench of rotten eggs emanated from the open fridge, where the food was replaced by an assortment of shirts, jeans, gloves, and socks. The front door was open, hanging on its hinges while the floor itself was flooded with dirty green water. Zuman couldn't wrap his head around what had happened, but after dealing with strange stuff like this for a week now, he was rather frustrated. As Zuman stood in the chaotic cottage, his mind drifted back to 2 months ago, when it all began. May 28, 2009. Zuman Mihran had just graduated from West Bengal's college, ready to pursue his dream of becoming a software engineer. However, the next day he received a letter from his grandfather that completely shattered his plans. The letter explained that his grandfather was going out of town for a while, and he did not expect to return before at least a month. Therefore, Zuman would have to look after his grandfather's ranch in Texas, which was on the other side of the globe. Zuman crumpled the letter in his hand, his stomach sinking. He had never been close to his grandfather, a man his family often called crazy. The thought of spending a month on the ranch felt like a prison sentence. Part of the reason why Zuman had not visited him in years was a result of his grandfather being extremely superstitious and prejudiced. The worst part was the fact that his age was now nearing 102, which was simply astounding and also unfortunate for Zuman's part. But now that his grandfather had gone away, Zuman's father insisted he should go to Texas. Zuman had practically begged him to change his mind. "Dad, I can't spend a month shoveling cow dung. I just graduated. I need to find a job," he said. But he got the same reply every time. "Zuman, it's an opportunity you should not pass. It's only for a month anyway. It won't kill you." Zuman reluctantly said goodbye to all of his family members, including his mother who lay beneath a tombstone, gone when he was only 2. His mother had always wanted him to become an engineer, but that possibility seemed to be quite far away at the moment. Soon he was sent to the ranch in Texas. The ranch comprised of a large wheat field, a sizable pasture, 2 barns, and a cottage. Out of these, Zuman was most interested in the cottage, hoping that it was well maintained. At first, he was actually quite impressed with the place. Although small, the kitchen was clean and had a nice assortment of wooden cabinets with polished handles that gleamed in the light. The bedroom was spacious, with a comfy cushioned bed and hanging ceiling lights that cast a luxurious glow across the room. The basement was completely empty and dirty, with cobwebs and dust scattered all around the room. Zuman spent the next couple of days getting accustomed to the environment, learning how to look after the cows and sheep. Thankfully, he was not quite alone here. A dog named Blake was also with him. He was specifically used to herd the sheep. Zuman felt bad for him. It was evident that his grandfather had not taken care of him, considering the malnourished body and its frightened demeanor. Zuman had fed him well and tended to some of his wounds, trying to lift his spirits. Fortunately, he was already looking better than he did. Although the cottage was clean and maintained, the barns were in a very poor condition, and all of the animals in there were smeared with dirt. "The old fool kept the luxury to himself," he muttered, looking at the animals forced to live in the horrible environment. His heart was moved by their pleading looks, and he decided to clean the entire ranch. Zuman went out of his way to clean up both the exterior and interior of the barn. Despite regretting the cow dung cleanup, he felt very accomplished once the job was done, and the barns looked as good as new. The next day, Zuman decided to go through some of the cabinets inside his room, checking if anything entertaining was there. The lack of a television and internet was driving him crazy thus, forcing him to rely on books. But the books that lay around the house were all strange religious books, with a crap ton of strange scribbles riddled on the pages. The man was truly cracked, he said, going through the cabinets, revealing even more religious books. This angered Zuman so much that he decided to throw all of the books away. He started to get rid of the books one by one until the pile of books revealed one diary, much cleaner than the other books, and one which showed clear signs of use, whether it be the cracked spine, creased and yellow pages, or the stained cover. Zuman curiously opened it. Only a single page was brimmed with writing. The rest remained empty. The date was written as follows: 15th of June, 2009. The very first paragraph sent shivers down his spine. By order of the harvester, ye must submit 17 souls to him. Fail to do so, and you will be killed. We won't accept sheep anymore. We need human flesh. With each line, Zuman's heart fastened its pace, pounding aggressively. Below the first paragraph lay a strange symbol, a large scythe with blood dripping from its tip. Below it lay a seemingly lifeless body of a human, one that had a striking resemblance to his grandfather. Zuman immediately threw the diary into the blazing fireplace, letting it turn into ashes as he stared, horrified by the contents of the diary. What did it mean by the harvester? Zuman let that thought aside before retiring to sleep. A strange dream swirled through his mind that night, one that he would never forget till the end of his days. Visions of the cottage's interior flashed in his mind. Only instead of being clean and arranged, everything was scattered, and although he could not make out the other odd things laid on the floor, he definitely noticed a dead animal. What it was he could not guess, but it was evident that it had been torn apart, with blood leaking from its exposed gut, worms munching on its brains while flies buzzed over it. Zuman immediately got up from his slumber, panting heavily. His heart was beating against his rib cage, and his mind kept flashing the gory image in front of him. He looked at his alarm clock, its numbers flashing. 3:25. Suddenly, he heard Blake's barks echoing from outside. Grabbing his flashlight, Zuman stepped outside, the chill biting into his skin. He could see Blake's silhouette in the distance, his barks getting increasingly louder. He rushed to Blake, noticing how his eyes were widened, his tail curled up under his body. Blake trotted close to his side, his growls turned into whimpers, and tears emanated from Blake's eyes. The barn in front of them stood menacingly, with its door hung open, its movements sluggish despite the absence of wind. "Anyone there?" Zuman called, his voice faltering. The only response was the rhythmic creak of the door. Zuman turned towards Blake. "What's the matter, buddy?" Blake only returned a whimper with widened eyes. He kept glancing towards the barn. Zuman let out a sigh. Plucking up his courage, he stepped inside, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the barn. The animals were eerily still, their eyes wide and fixed on the far corner. All of them were breathing raspily, as if they had seen something out of this world. The hair on the back of Zuman's neck prickled as he moved closer, his boots crunching on scattered hay. Suddenly, a pit-pat echoed from behind. Jerking himself towards the direction, his heart missed a beat. He could have sworn that he saw something there. The flashlight flickered. Zuman froze as he noticed something in the corner, a dark, shifting shape among the hay. The air felt heavier, pressing against him like a weight. Slowly, the pile moved and something rolled out onto the floor. Pit-pat. The light flickered again, revealing a glimpse of it. A strange object, its edges dark and uneven. Zuman couldn't make sense of it, but a deep chill ran through him. A whisper followed, low and cold, curling around him like smoke. "You shouldn't have burned it." Zuman let out a gasp and fell to the floor, his flashlight breaking from the impact. Blake barked behind him, the sound sharp and panicked. Zuman whipped out his cell phone, his heartbeats matching the pit-pats echoing around him. He fumbled around the phone's interface and turned on the torch. When the light flickered back on, the corner was empty. The barn was still, yet Zuman's skin crawled. On the ground where the object had been was a single, scorched page. Shaking, he leaned closer to read the dark, jagged writing. "The harvester is watching." Blake barked again, snapping Zuman from his trance. Without hesitation, he bolted from the barn, slamming the door behind him. The stillness outside was no less suffocating than the darkness inside. Back in the safety of the cottage, Zuman leaned against the door, his breath uneven. He glanced back at the barn. Something was there. Something waiting. And it wasn't going to leave him alone. Screw this shit! What did the old fool get himself into? Oh, unfortunate me. Why do I have to deal with this? He had no choice but to return to the house and expect a quiet sleep, but that was quite impossible after what had happened. Blake got up on the bed and curled himself on his lap. Zuman's unease evaporated instantly. The comfort of Blake's presence allowed him to sleep through that night, although the same couldn't be said for the rest. The next day, while he was busy tending to his sheep, the neighbor came to pay a visit. She was an old lady, her face quite beautiful despite her age. "My boy, I see that you are taking care of the ranch quite well," she said, looking at the now restored ranch and smiling. Blake barked in approval, receiving a pat from the lady. She nodded before saying, "You've really spruced the place up, Zuman." "Your grandfather sure left you a lot of work," she said, her smile transforming into a frown. "Cracked he was. Cracked." Zuman laughed grimly. "Thanks. And yes, he was always a bit different, as you might say." "My boy," she said, scanning for any eavesdroppers around her before saying, "Forgive me for spying, but every June, your grandpa vanishes from town for a while, going off to God knows where. And every time he comes back, he brings a dozen books with him, all religious ones." "Religious books?" Zuman muttered, stroking his chin. "I did find a lot of religious books lying around the whole cottage. It is quite skeptical, but again, maybe he just got some strange pleasure from reading religious books." Zuman knew very well that it was not the case. Knowing his grandfather, he was sure there was something more sinister behind his motives. The lady let out a grim chuckle before saying, "I wish it was that simple, but books were not the only thing that went into the house. I have seen him killing sheep for whatever strange reason before dragging them inside the cottage. After that, I used to see flashing lights and strange screams coming out of the house. You don't know how chilling it was to see that sight." A long silence followed, leaving Zuman to wonder about the whole ordeal. Many questions were gliding around his mind. Frankly, he was not sure what to think of all of this. He had always disliked his grandfather, but he hadn't expected him to do such a thing. Moreover, could he really trust this lady? "My advice," the lady said, raising her voice, "don't meddle with his strange affairs. Keep yourself out of trouble." "I will keep that in mind," Zuman nodded, his voice wavering as he spoke. The worst part was the fact that this story fit seamlessly into the prospect of the diary that he had found. He let his thoughts aside before turning back to the lady. "Would you like to join me for supper tonight? I'd appreciate some company, and perhaps we could talk more about this." The lady's face softened and she smiled gently. "Of course, my boy. I'll bring over some of my stew. We can discuss more then." "Thank you. I'll see you this evening," Zuman replied, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Later that evening, she came over with a pot of her delicious stew. During supper, Zuman had got to know the neighbor's name, that being Olivia. They had chatted for a while, discussing the affairs around the town, with Zuman receiving many compliments from Olivia regarding his well-done job of maintaining the ranch. Zuman was quite cheerful after eating the delicious stew that Olivia had made. For a moment, he managed to push aside his worries about the harvester and enjoy the warmth of her company. But as the night wore on, his questions resurfaced, and he knew he needed to get more answers. Still, he forcefully pushed them aside, thinking, "I really do not need more things to worry about. Why did the old fool get into this mess? He could have saved me a lot of questions." As the first week passed, Zuman found a rhythm. The ranch began to prosper under his care, the animals looked healthier, and even Blake's spirit seemed lifted. Even Olivia had helped him with taking care of the sheep when he was tired. She even cooked him dinner during the night. They had developed a mother-son relationship quickly with their bond, strengthening every day. Many uneventful days passed until the arrival of the 13th of June 2009, a date which changed the course of everything. It had been a normal morning for Zuman, trimming the wool off of the sheep before tending to the cows. He did not forget to clean Blake's kennel and feed him. After all that was done, he decided to take a little rest inside the cottage. As he was about to walk in, the barks of Blake echoed through the air, coming from the ranch's gate. Zuman looked into the distance before spotting Blake barking at a man outside the ranch. Zuman hurried towards the gate before telling Blake to go into the cottage. Zuman eyed the strange man wearing a brown trench coat and sunglasses. Zuman was confused by his attire, which he thought absurdly resembled a mafia member from a 70s movie. The man stepped forward before speaking with a heavy Peruvian accent. "Where is the old man?" "He isn't here. The ranch belongs to me now. What is your purpose?" The man eyed Zuman warily, scanning his facial features. "I come to deliver a message," the man said, pulling out an envelope from his pocket and handing it out to him. "It is from the harvester, as you probably know." "The harvester? Who is he?" Zuman asked, but the man scurried off into the distance without a reply. Frustrated with the whole ordeal, Zuman muttered, "What has the old fool got himself into? Who is this so-called harvester?" Zuman grappled with the decision to open the letter for a long time. Eventually, curiosity got the best of him, and he opened the letter. His heart skipped a beat as he read the small message. "The Ides of June grow near, and so do I. You better have prepared yourself, old man. I need you to pay your debt. I need you to give me a soul. The harvester." He couldn't sleep later that night. The dream from before kept invading his slumber. This time, Blake's presence was not enough. Unanswered questions kept gnawing at his mind. Who is the harvester? What does he have to do with Pops? He now hoped that he had not thrown the diary away. Maybe he could have got some answers from it. "I need answers, but who can I trust? Olivia seems to know something, but how much will she share?" Unable to contain his curiosity, he decided to pay Olivia a visit next day, hoping that she knew something about the matter. The countdown for the Ides of June began. 14th June, 2009. Zuman got up early that day, rushing off to Olivia's house. "Sit down, my boy," she said, letting him inside the house and pointing towards an armchair. Although Olivia had been to Zuman's cottage quite a few times, Zuman hadn't got the same privilege till now. They chat around for a while, talking about general things. Despite his growing unease, Zuman hesitated to tell Olivia about the whole ordeal. He feared she might dismiss him as crazy. Soon his impatience crept in, and he blurted out, "Olivia, I must ask you something. Do you know anything about someone called the Harvester?" Olivia's eyes widened and she immediately said, "Harvesters? My boy, there are so many harvesters here that I do not know which one you're talking about." But it was quite clear from her wavering voice that it was a lie. She knew exactly what he was talking about. "You know of what I speak," Zuman said, his heart racing. "It has been troubling me ever since I got here." He proceeded to explain all of his findings from start to end, his encounter with the stranger and also about the letter. Olivia patiently listened, although it was evident from her deep breaths that what she had heard was not good. "You have got yourself into great trouble," she began, wiping the sweat off her forehead. "The harvester is not a harvester of crops or animals. It, or should I say he, is the harvester of souls. Many tales and legends circulate around the harvester in our town, with many regarding him to be death himself, for he only appears when a person is destined to die." A long silence followed, only broken by the loud thumping of Zuman's heart. Eventually, he broke the silence. "That sounds unreal, but with everything I've seen, I believe it. What should I do?" She got up and brought back a newspaper clipping, its title reading, "The Truth About the Harvester." Not much information was present other than what Olivia had just told him. "But how did that old fool get linked with all this?" he said quietly, but Olivia overheard her. "Now I had always suspected that your cracked grandfather was meddling in affairs that he should not be," she continued in a grim voice. "From your story, it is quite evident that your grandfather has found a way to cheat death, and death ain't happy. But much of this is a riddle and one that does not seem to have any answer." All of this information only made Zuman more anxious. "Listen, my boy," Olivia said, putting her hand on his shoulder in a kind manner. "You need not be afraid. I have spent my whole youth studying these myths and legends of old, and I must give you this advice. Get out while you still can, for the harvester does not play fair, and there is no way to move him with words. I suggest you leave in the early morning tomorrow." "But I can't just leave. What about Blake and all the other animals? What about you? I know it's hard, but your life is worth more than this ranch. Go, Zuman. Go before it's too late. Do not worry about me." Zuman left Olivia's house, all drenched in sadness. He had to go, or he wouldn't live to see another day. But that meant saying goodbye to the ranch, the animals, and of course Blake. He just could not bear to leave him there when there was such a big threat looming over the ranch, poised to strike at any moment. As Zuman walked through the fields, memories flooded his mind. Moments shared with Olivia, time spent caring for Blake and the other animals. Approaching the cottage, he noticed something unusual. The door hung off its hinges. His hands trembled as he pushed the door aside, proceeding into the house. As soon as he stepped inside, his shoes were immediately soaked by the dirty green water flooding the floor. More absurdly, the kitchen was a complete mess, with plates shattered on the ground, cabinets all broken, and the sink open, water pouring out of it every passing moment. Zuman let out a yell before hurrying to turn off the sink. His heart pounded as he started to make his way toward the bedroom. The living room sofa was marred with black stains while the fridge was now open, with its contents replaced by old socks, jeans, and shirts that belonged to his grandfather. He stood among the chaos, simply frozen in shock. "Where is Blake?" he suddenly thought, recognizing the lack of barks. Feeling fear grasp him, he shouted, "Blake, where are you, boy?" He did not care about the disarray anymore. His mind was completely focused on finding Blake. "Where are you?" he kept shouting, with each shout more desperate than the other. Eventually, he arrived inside the bedroom, and he instantly dropped to his knees. Blake lay there with his body torn apart in half. Worms fed on his gut while flies buzzed loudly. Zuman sat there silently, tears pouring out of his eyes. There was a long silence before he broke off into tears, his cries echoing through the air. "No, not like this," he kept crying, banging his head against the wall. He stopped crying, however, after he noticed a note on the nightstand. The handwriting was clear, written with blood which Zuman hoped was not Blake's. "I warn you for the last time. Do not run away again, or you will face the consequences." And beneath this sentence was the signature, "The Harvester." Before he could think about anything else, the alarm ringed off by itself. Its loud ringing was followed by a loud boom, which reverberated through the air. Zuman looked out of the window, and his heart burst. Olivia's house was on fire, smoke fuming from the now decrepit house. Zuman could not believe his eyes. It felt like his whole world had come crashing down in a matter of minutes. "What did I do to deserve this?" he thought, wiping off tears. "Curse the Harvester." He looked back at the alarm clock, its display clearly showing 0002. It was now the IDs of June. His crying stopped as the realization hit him like a truck. He was the payment. This was all a setup. His grandfather used him to pay his debt, and now it was the IDs of March. He just sat there for a few minutes, but he did not run. No, he did not pack his bags to leave or try to hide. He went straight down to the pastures, sitting on the grass. "Curse that old fool," he said, his eyes moving to a shadow in the distance. A tall, lean figure materialized in the distance. It seemed to float above the grass, not disturbing a single speck of dust. Its head was large, with jagged, sharp teeth jutting out of its huge jaw. Its long arms hang from his body, and on it was a huge scythe, big enough to slice Zuman in half. Yet Zuman did not move. The figure stopped short, studying Zuman's figure. Zuman got up from the grass and glared at the Harvester. In his eyes gleamed a raging fury. He tightened his fists and said, "Tell me, Harvester, why have you taken everything from me? Why do you destroy my life?" "My debt needs to be settled, fool. Your grandfather had avoided me for years, and I won't return empty-handed again." It hissed, the high-pitched voice screeching through the air. "Now tremble before my wrath," it said, changing its pitch to an extremely low one. An eerie silence followed, only broken by the shriek of the cold breeze. Zuman took one step forward, maintaining eye contact with the entity. "I do not fear you. I do not wish life any longer. Do what you came to do, Zuman said before spitting at the harvester's floating feet. The harvester's sinister smile transformed into a frown. He hesitated for a while, recognizing Zuman's courage. You defy me? Very well. You'll meet your end with courage. It's more than most can say, it said before laughing eerily. Zuman spread out his arms and closed his eyes, recalling every happy memory on this ranch. Any last words? Zuman hesitated for a moment and then said, Make that old fool pay. The harvester let out a deep chuckle. He thought to himself, It was good while it lasted. Goodbye, world. I will go to see my mother. Get on with it already, he said at last, taking a deep, long breath. The harvester raised its scythe before proceeding to tear Zuman in half, its laughter echoing through the otherwise silent night. However, that was not the end. Somewhere across the Pacific, Zuman's grandfather sipped a cup of coffee, relaxing on a yacht, smiling grimly as the Ides of June passed, and he did not. Immortality is mine. My debt is paid. Hail the one with the darkness, the harvester. His chuckle caught in his throat as he saw the harvester materializing in front of him. We meet at last, the harvester said, raising its scythe.